On that focus, we do continue with salvaging a city. Citigroup, as you may or may not know, has been given the most money of all the banks via TARP funds, $25 billion in total so far. So should Citi somehow be more accountable than the other banks because it received the most money? Is it too little, too late? Well, for answers to those questions, we bring in Congressman Jim Jordan right now. He is a Republican from Ohio, is also on the House Budget Committee. Congressman Jordan, we're glad to have you with us. Before we get to your plans, what you think should be included in the stimulus, we know you released your own ideas today. I just want to ask you about these headlines coming through from Citigroup as they relate to the financials. Do you regret the way the first half of TARP has been spent?
Oh, certainly. I mean, anytime you have a big federal government program where they're going to spend billions of taxpayer dollars and it was thrown together in a short time, you just know that's potential for chaos, and that's what we've seen. It hasn't worked, and that's why we shouldn't release the other $350 billion. The first one didn't work. I voted against it. We shouldn't release the second half because the American people have seen, the results of what happens when you do this kind of thing.
So you think that maybe the idea is then to do nothing, actually, for this second half of TARP that's being considered?
I mean, just go back to the general question. It's who do you trust more to help us get out of this economic situation we're in? Do you trust families and taxpayers and small business owners, or do you trust the federal government? I mean, most American families, sometimes when I'm back home speaking, I'll tell folks, with the exception of the military, tell me something the federal government does well. And most people kind of look at you with a blank stare because they get it. They understand big federal government here in Washington doesn't do many things very well. And the idea we're letting them spend trillions and trillions of dollars and mortgage our kids' and grandkids' future is just the wrong direction to head. And we've seen it play out. There's all kinds of reasons to be against this bailout fever that's grabbed Washington. But one of the best ones is we don't have any money. And the second one is it hasn't worked. So, that's why we shouldn't release the second half of what was done last fall.
Even though some people argued, and some Nobel Prize-winning economists argued if nothing were done, the economy would have gone even deeper into recession. You don't believe that?
And you can see great economists who will argue. I mean, you look at history. When you look at, what was it, 7 years into the New Deal, 1940, unemployment was still at 14%. So 7 years after all that government spending, all those government programs, we still had double the rate, unemployment rate that we have today. Big federal centralized government spending is not as good as the free market and entrepreneurs and families and small business owners having more of their money and actually fostering economic growth.
So we know, shifting gears here a little bit, you're saying big government doesn't do too much to help the average taxpayer, yet you have proposed today a stimulus package that you say is the exception to the rule?
Yeah, no, we think it follows, what we know works. We're going to say we're going to cut capital gains tax, we're going to cut the corporate tax rate, which we know will have an immediate impact and help stimulate economic activity. We're going to let families keep more of their money with a child tax credit. Our bill also talks about reducing the income tax rates across the board. Those are the kind of things that work. And we also say we're not going to spend more. I mean, the choice is real simple. Are you going to lower taxes, which we know works, or are you going to have a huge new federal spending, which is what the Obama plan has been talking about? We think that choice is simple, and we want a full debate so that the American people, when they see those two choices, we think they side with us.
Part of the Obama plan, though, is $300 billion worth of tax cuts. So how is your plan very different?
Yeah, it's actually, I would say a lot of what he calls tax cuts are actually rebates to people who didn't pay taxes. So it's a smaller number than that. And to the extent that the president-elect wants to embrace concepts that we know that work, like tax cuts, we agree with that portion. The problem with what we've read so far, and we haven't seen the overall plan, the problem is the huge new spending, coupled with what's transpired so far with government spending. That's the real problem.
And Congressman, before I let you go, some controversy over the nominated Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner. I know the House does not get a vote, but what would you personally do if it did? I mean, how do you feel about him potentially being the head of the IRS?
Diedre, what is it with Democrats and their personal income taxes? First Charlie Rangel, now
But he did pay after he was audited, in fairness to him.
I understand, and if that's the case, that'll come out in the hearings, and there'll be an up or down vote in the United States Senate, and that's the way it's supposed to be. You have the full airing of the facts, and you have a vote. But I just know if this was Republican, you can imagine the kind of treatment that individual would be receiving after this news becomes public. So we'll see how it plays out, and if he paid him and it was an innocent mistake, that's one thing. But it is kind of interesting, the treatment that the Democrat designee or nominee gets versus what we know would happen if it was a Republican.
Congressman Jim Jordan, we thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Republican Congressman.